The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills cast member shared that it's been really helpful to have her friend living with her amid their separations. Kyle Richards shares new details about living with Teddi Mellencamp. Kyle Richards and Teddi Mellencamp are officially roommates. The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills cast members shed light on their unorthodox living situation on a new episode of Bravo's Hot Mic podcast, jokingly telling host Alex Baskin, "I have shared custody with Teddi Mellencamp. She lives with me on Tuesdays and Wednesdays." Teddi is currently separated from husband Edwin Arroyev, with whom she shares 3 children, Slate, Cruz, and Dove. Teddi is also stepmom to Edwin's daughter Bella. However, to maintain a sense of normalcy for the kids, Teddi and Edwin have opted to rotate the days that they're living in their once shared home, so their kids don't have to go from one place to another. As Teddi searched for a new place to serve as her base camp, she asked Kyle if she could crash for a night or two at the Umansky family's Encino home, to which Kyle said, "Why wouldn't you just stay here? Why would you go spend the money? I mean, I have a big house, I have a guest house. That's silly." So that's how that started. Though Kyle has plenty of rooms for Teddi to pick from, the former Real Housewives of Beverly Hills cast member is staying in what Kyle jokingly called the divorce room, where Kyle herself once slept when she and Mauricio initiated their separation. "It was supposed to be like, one day there's gonna be babies up there," Kyle told Baskin. "We're like, no, it's the divorce room." Kyle Richards talks Teddi Mellencamp living situation. While Kyle is almost an empty nester now that her daughters are all grown up, she's found herself taking on a nurturing role for Teddi in recent months, revealing on Hot Mic that Teddi once called her crying at night and then crawled into bed with her. Kyle teased, "I'm sorry to share that, Teddi, but she literally sounded like a little girl crying." Kyle noted that Teddi was rightfully emotional, sharing that it was the night that the winds were so scary and the fires were starting. But Kyle also thinks everything was overwhelming Teddi in that moment, adding, "It was her marriage, the fires were going on, being on edge of the evacuations." They couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation, though. "We literally sat there and we could not stop laughing. I mean, if people could see us in our little basically footsie pajamas," Kyle told Baskin. The laughter only increased when Teddi and Kyle realized that their recent attempts to get a lip flip using Botox left them without the ability to pucker their lips. This wouldn't be a big deal normally, but made it slightly difficult to do small tasks like blowing out a candle. "We were crying, laughing, and we were trying to whistle, and I was like, whistling is not an option anymore," she laughed. "We were just up laughing all night and just to have those moments when we're going through what we're going through right now is just, it really is helpful," Kyle continued. Kyle says her friend group is so small after separation from Mauricio. Teddi is just one of a handful of people that has stuck by Kyle as she navigates her separation from Mauricio Umansky and lifestyle changes. "I joke that my circle's gotten so small it's a dot now," she said. Kyle added that she hasn't lost friendships for any dramatic reason, nor has anyone felt like, "Oh, I have to choose a side in the separation." Rather, Kyle said that it's been a matter of choosing the friendships that will be a source of comfort as she goes through this time of transition. "When you're struggling, I'm not good company. I'm not gonna go out tonight," she explained. "Plus, you do start, certain people you start trusting a little less. I don't want to share as much with them. I don't know. You do definitely become a little less trusting of people." To find out what else Kyle had to say, watch the video edition of Bravo's Hot Mic podcast at Briefing on Bravo Podcast or listen for free wherever you get your podcasts. Roommates at the Crossroads. The house in Encino had always been more than just a home to Kyle Richards. It was a symbol of her life's work, built brick by brick with her husband, Mauricio Umansky. The grand hallways, the wide open spaces, the guest house tucked away by the pool, It was a sanctuary that had seen years of laughter, family gatherings, and the occasional arguments that come with being a part of a high-profile marriage. But now, the house felt different. With the laughter of her children growing quieter and the uncertainty of her own marriage looming large, Kyle found herself in a place she never imagined. A newly empty nest, but not quite empty. Teddi Mellencamp, one of her closest friends and former castmates on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, had unexpectedly entered her life in a way neither woman anticipated. It had all started innocently enough when Teddi, separated from her husband, Edwin Arroyev, needed a temporary place to stay. Teddi had been grappling with the emotional roller coaster of her own separation, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her 3 children. Her life had been upended, and the home she had shared with Edwin no longer felt like a refuge. "I thought I'd stay a night or 2, but I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner," Teddi had said one evening. Kyle, ever the gracious host, responded with a simple invitation. "Why would you go spend the money on a hotel? Just stay here." It seemed only natural. Kyle had the space, and in that moment, it felt like the most comforting thing to do. Teddi had reluctantly agreed, and the next day she moved in. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that Teddi and Kyle's living arrangement wasn't just about offering a bed for the night. It was a lifeline, a shared moment of support in the midst of both women's personal upheavals. Kyle's world had shifted, too. Though her children were no longer living at home, the shadow of her separation from Mauricio lingered over everything. Their split had been messy, emotional, and public. The once happy couple now found themselves separated by more than just physical space. Kyle's friends, the ones who had stuck by her through thick and thin, had become fewer and farther between. "I joke that my circle's gotten so small it's a dot now," Kyle had admitted during a candid conversation on the Bravo's Hot Mic podcast. It was a joke, but there was truth in her words. People she had once considered close were now distant, and the sense of betrayal that often accompanied separations had begun to settle in. Trust had become a luxury, but Teddi was different. She wasn't just a roommate, she was a lifeline. "You have no idea how much this has helped," Kyle had confessed, her voice tinged with the exhaustion of someone who had been holding it all together for too long. "Teddi is here for me when it feels like the world is falling apart. And we get to laugh about all the ridiculous things that happen in the middle of it." The divorce room, as Kyle affectionately called it, was where Teddi had made her temporary home. It was a room Kyle had once shared with Mauricio, a space that had once been filled with hope for their future, now a symbol of everything they had lost. It was strange, Kyle had said, but it also felt oddly comforting to have Teddi in that room. She wasn't there to replace what was lost. She was there to provide a sense of comfort, of normalcy, when everything else felt uncertain. Their time spent together often had moments of surreal humor, even in the darkest hours. Kyle laughed as she recalled a particularly absurd evening where the two had been unable to pucker their lips after an ill-advised Botox treatment. They had both tried to whistle, only to realize they couldn't. Their failed attempts had turned into a fit of laughter, the kind of laughter that heals wounds and helps you forget the weight of your struggles, if only for a moment. In the midst of everything that had been going wrong, they found themselves enjoying each other's company in ways that reminded them of their deep bond. But those moments were fleeting. There were nights, too, when the weight of it all settled in. Kyle had found Teddi curled up in bed with her one night, the sound of her friend crying cutting through the stillness of the room. The night had been full of anxiety. The winds had been fierce, and the threat of nearby fires loomed large. Teddi's emotions were raw, the pressures of her separation compounded by the environmental chaos. Kyle had wrapped her arms around Teddi, comforting her as they both faced the uncertainty that had become their lives. "It's hard when everything feels like it's unraveling," Kyle had shared with a soft sigh. "Teddi's dealing with so much right now, and I'm just here for her. I know what it feels like to be on the other side of the storm." Their friendship had always been strong, but it had taken on a new dimension since Teddi moved in. Kyle had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together, even when her own world was falling apart. But now she had to allow herself to lean on Teddi, to accept that it was okay not to be okay sometimes. In the midst of their struggles, the two women found solace in the simplicity of shared moments. They cooked dinner together, watched movies in their oversized pajamas, and found humor in the absurdities of life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't how either of them had imagined their lives at this stage, but it was enough.